The year was 2011. I was in grade 11 and I'd recently enrolled in a math and science class at a private tutor's close to my house. Every evening, I would come back home, have a snack, and head to my tutor's house where my tutor, an elderly woman in her early 60s, would help me and two of my peers with our subjects, explaining concepts, clarifying our doubts, and designing problems for us to work out. The usual. But what was unusual was what happened on an otherwise normal evening. I was early for class that evening and was waiting for my peers and my tutor to show up. Because I did not have a cell phone back then, let alone a smartphone, I had nothing to do to pass time. And that was when I found a book inside the desk that I was seated at. I pulled the book out and read the title. It was The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I had never heard of the book before, nor had I ever heard of the author. Had it been any other book, I would still be equally clueless, because back then my knowledge of books was embarrassingly limited. Reading never appealed to me. Reading was not something that I found particularly interesting, and there was not a single book I could have said I had read from cover to cover. But that was about to change. As I flipped through the book, I found that it was an abridged children's edition of The Count of Monte Cristo, and to my greatest delight, I found there were illustrations accompanying the text, and the spacing between the lines was quite generous. And because I did not have anything else that I could do to pass time, I decided to give the book a try. Now, if you have read The Count of Monte Cristo, and I applaud you if in case you have read the 1,000 pages or so, or even if you have read the abridged version like I did, you know what a great story it is. In fact, I was so invested in the book that I never realized when my tutor walked into the room. She asked me what it was that I was reading. I showed her the book and immediately asked her if I could take it home. She agreed, but with the condition that I write a test at the end of the week. And I agreed immediately. In fact, had she asked me to write a test every day for the rest of the year, I would have agreed to that too, because I desperately needed to know what would happen to Edmond Dantes. And I did. After class, I went back home, pulled the book out of my bag, settled myself on the living room sofa, and rejoined Dantes on his adventure. And what an adventure that was. I still remember the thrill that I felt at that point of time. The thrill of not just reading a great story, but of finishing a book from cover to cover. When I was done reading the last page, I turned the book around and looked at it as if it was a treasure that I had just unearthed. A treasure whose existence I was oblivious of until that point of time. It was then that I knew that I had to read more books. The next day, I headed over to the City Central Library, got myself a membership card, and issued my very first library book. It was The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. And I must be honest here, most of the stories in that book made very little sense to me. But still, there was something appealing about it, and I did end up reading it. And once I was done with the book, I went back to the library, and this time I issued 2 books. One was Dead Girls Don't Write Letters by Gail Giles, and the other was Tell Me Your Dreams by Sidney Sheldon. The Giles book, I abandoned it after reading a couple of pages because I did not find it to be interesting enough, but the Sidney Sheldon book was something that I breezed through. It had great characters, a great plot, filled with suspense, and it was overall a fun book to read. And once I had read that book, I knew I wanted to read more. I went back to the library once again, and this time I was looking for a Sidney Sheldon book, and in the process, I found other authors who I then read over a period of time, authors including Dan Brown, Stephen King, Jeffrey Archer, Agatha Christie, and scores of other authors whose titles graced the library shelves. The library played a major role in my reading journey and in developing my reading taste, which at that point of time was predominantly fiction and especially thrillers and suspense novels. It was only when I started my undergraduate studies that I began reading non-fiction. Starting with popular science, I then branched into philosophy, history, sociology, biographies, and memoirs. It was also the time I began buying books. I had until then relied solely on libraries, and the thought of buying books never crossed my mind. By the time I began my professional career, I had already built a good collection of books, which have over the years grown quite steadily alongside my growing interests. Today, I cannot imagine my life without books. Books anchor me to the world. And I know that it's quite a statement to make, but I truly mean it. The time I spend reading is the time I invest in building my personality, in shaping my being. Reading to me is an exercise for the brain. It keeps me cognitively fit, it makes me more articulate, and it helps me make sense of the world that is sliding towards nonsensicality. And all of this was possible because of that happy accident that happened a decade and a half ago. Had I not found that book inside the desk that evening, I probably wouldn't have become the reader I am today. And that brings me to something important. All schools and educational institutions, no matter how big or how small, must make space for serendipitous discovery of books. Students must frequent libraries, not avoid them like an anathema. A school or an educational institution must not only be known for providing quote unquote ultra modern amenities catered to the digital natives, which I'm sure has its own place and purpose in the present educational landscape, but it must also be known for providing quiet contemplative corners filled with thoughts of individuals who have spent years of their lives distilling ideas into words within the two covers of a book. And to all students watching this video, I don't know if you will find a book inside your desks that will change your lives. And maybe you don't want to, and that's totally fine. But what I do know is that you will find it if you look for it. And you don't need to go far. Go to your school or college library or your local library. Browse the shelves, look for a book that speaks to you. Don't feel obliged to read it in one sitting or to read a fixed number of pages every day. Read it during those pockets of time that you would otherwise spend on your phone. Not while using your phone for something that you find to be truly meaningful to you, but when you find yourself scrolling through reels with glazed eyes, looking but not seeing, when your mind is in a stupor induced by the slop that floods your feed, in that moment, set your phone aside and pick up that book. Do it once, do it twice, and slowly you will realize that reading is more enjoyable than mindless scrolling. Or maybe you will not. Either ways, you will know only when you give it a try. And I sincerely hope that you do give it a try. I hope you give books the chance to change your life. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, start reading and stay curious.